Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Young. I'm the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego. And we are very excited to be working in thought partnership with the Bank of America to co-host a 4-part workshop series. And the series is aimed at supporting and strengthening nonprofit leaders and organizations at a time, obviously, of unprecedented challenge. With the pandemic, we've got economic upheaval, we've got racial justice protests, extreme weather, and so much more. And these sessions are really meant for all of you as Bank of America grantees, community partners, clients of Bank of America and associates, and others in the community to really help support you at this time and bolster your strength and your resilience. We're excited to kick off this 3rd workshop in the series, and it's part 1 of a 2-part series that our wonderful Director of Governance and Community Programs at the Nonprofit Institute, Lynn Corbett's going to be doing. And it's on how to lead when you don't have the answers. And we really hope that this is for you to help prepare you for and to adapt to our new reality. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dana Alligood with Bank of America.
Great, thank you, Emily. Like Emily said, my name is Dana Alligood, and I am the Executive and Commercial Banking for the not-for-profit team for the West. And so many of you on the call are clients of ours, and our goal is to make financial lives better. We are excited to have you join us today and thrilled that Lynn is going to share some of his best practices and advice for us. And as Emily said, we are all faced with uncertainty during these times. And as leaders, many people come to us for guidance, for direction, for motivation, and for answers. And we don't always have all those things as leaders in these unprecedented times. So we're thrilled to have Lynn join us. And I know me personally as an executive at the bank, but then also as a mother and a wife and a daughter, I have a lot of people asking me for guidance or advice or direction. And I'll be curious to hear what Lynn has to say, but I'll share briefly with you that what I've found during COVID is that I try to control focus on what I can control and let go of those things that I can't control. But then also I try to remind myself to get up and get some fresh air, get some exercise, get some steps in. I find that my perspective and my energy level can change if I do remember to take care of myself as well. So Lynn, you can course correct me later as you go through your advice and tell me if there's some other things I should be doing, but I thought that might be helpful from my own personal perspective and experience. But we at Bank of America, we understand that the challenges that leaders like you all in the audience are facing. And so that's why we invest in resources like the partnership with the University of San Diego. And so we're thrilled to say that we've got Lynn Corbett here joining us. I'm going to do a little bio, a little intro for you, Lynn, before we turn it over to you. But as Emily said, Lynn is the Director of Governance and Community Programs at the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego. And as a senior executive with over 20 years of experience, Lynn has developed innovative strategies to strengthen not only the individuals, but also the organizations within business, nonprofit, and government sectors. Lynn is also a nonprofit consultant and a faculty member at the University of San Diego in the School of Leadership and Education Sciences, where he has taught graduate level courses in governance, leadership, and strategy. In addition, Lynn holds a master's degree in public administration with an emphasis in nonprofit management from NYU and is currently pursuing his doctoral degree in leadership studies at USD. So we are lucky to have you, Lynn, and thrilled to have you. So I'm going to turn it over to you and you can take it away from here. Thanks.
Perfect, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you have a good day so far. I'm excited to share the next hour with you. I'll share my screen. If there's a problem, someone let me know. But you see my regular view or presenter view? Regular view?
We're seeing presenter view right now.
Perfect. Thank you. Giving away all my trade secrets. Okay, so Very nice to meet you all. Thank you very much. As you mentioned, people think about leadership and they think about a number of different things. Believe it or not, there's no agreed upon definition for leadership. So what I want you to do right now is everybody pick out one word, and I want you to put it in the chat and tell me what you think that one word is that describes leadership to you. All right, so go ahead. I'm going to let you see, just dump some words that you think is leadership to you. What does leadership mean to you in one word? Vulnerability, I love it. Opportunity to be vulnerable. Patience, very nice. Compassion, listening, trust, authenticity, humility, perfect. And believe it or not, many of these, when you do poll people, they're the top, like trust and empathy and commitment, right? Thinking about your team. So we're going to talk about leadership as a whole. Let me talk about, and you can keep those on coming because I'm going to keep on looking at them. So let's start with some of the objectives for today. So we are going to talk about, by the end of this workshop, we gain this knowledge and skills needed to be more effective as a leader, not just as a leader, but a leader facing complex challenges and leading teams. And we're going to evaluate new information using critical thinking skills and frameworks for applying them. You all will have a copy of these slides. If you need anything else, please feel free to reach out to the university or to myself and how we can help you. Of course, when you talk about leadership, it's so difficult to just be one part. So this is a two-part series. Today, I'm going to focus on the individual, and then next time that we have this, we're going to focus on the organization as a whole. So this is really about the individual leader. What are some tools that the individual leader can use? My goal is to really give you some of these tools that you can use, as opposed to just a number of different strategies. I really want them to be usable, right? I don't want you to have a tool belt with all these nice tools in them, they're all shiny, right? That just means they're not being used, right? I want you to have tools that they are and you're using them all the time. Okay. Before I get started, as Dana mentioned, I'm a New Yorker, or from New York, and I'll move. So if I'm moving too quick, just let me know and I'll slow down a little bit. I talk to nonprofit executives all over the country. I'm focused really on strategic planning and what that means for organizations. And the biggest thing that often comes up is that people, I believe, are holding on, saying, let's get back to the norm. We're waiting, let's hold on, right? So the country itself is kind of going through all of these different things, yet people are saying, hey, I want to hold on. I will tell you this, in the history of our country, whenever we have gone through something of this magnitude, we never go back to being the same. It is always going to be something different. Therefore, if you are planning, saying, oh, it'll get back to the same way, you will be left behind, right? We have to figure out, how do we adapt? How do we change? How do we get through this? But our thinking is limited if I'm trying to hold on. If I'm trying to hold on, I think differently. If I'm trying to figure out how do I emerge stronger as a result, my thinking is going to open up broadly. So that's where we're going to really focus on that. What does adaptability mean? How do we adapt to these environments? And what are some tools and some thinking and some strategies that can help us in that realm? So I'm going to start off telling a little bit of a story that'll help. This is what I call continual progression. I'll let you know that me and my wife have celebrated 8 years of marriage. And on the first year, she comes to me and she says, oh, Lynn, I think we should go to marital counseling. And here I am, I'm like, it's the first 3 weeks. You haven't even seen my good stuff yet, right? Give me a chance. So she's a clinical psychologist, so pray for me, right? I agree. I need all of your prayers. So she says to me, we should go as a matter of practice. So what we did was we started going once a quarter. And believe it or not, we still go once a quarter, twice a year. And what I found out was this, is I can explain to you in these 3 lines here. Okay, so when you first get married, often at times you feel like you're at a good place. Well, we were at a good place, but when we invested in it, learning how to use I statements, learning how to communicate, we actually went to a great place. So now when we got to that great place, when the move came and the kid came and everything else, we went down to just being good. You see, we invested in it. We got to a great place. The stress came, we went down to being good. Whereas if we were good, and then we didn't invest in it and the stress came, we'd be in a rough patch and it would have been very difficult. So I say the reason I show you this, one is it makes me feel better to share with somebody. So thank you for that free therapy. The second thing, the reason why I really share this with you is because people tell me all the time, oh, I'm good with this person. I'm good with this organization. I'm good here. And I say, take it to the next level. How do you 1% up that? How do you take things to the next level? So an employee who you deal with, and I'm saying, hey, tell me about your team. Oh, don't worry about them. We're good. Well, I say that when stress happens, when big adaptation happens and change happens, some of those relationships aren't good any longer. So how do we spend time investing in those relationships to take it into a great place? Because that's essentially what leadership is about also, investing in the right things and knowing what that investment could be for you. If you go online and you look for an Amazon, you put in leadership books, you will have like 200,000, right? Since there's no agreed upon leadership book, everybody's gonna come up and put their own spin on it, and they're gonna tell you, hey, I have a leadership book, all right? What the world does not need is another leadership book. Right? Everything about leadership is written somewhere. Too bad it's all in these different places. And by the way, for $7.99, you can get my next leadership book that I write. All right, so there's all of these leadership styles that people have, right? So the way I look at it is that there are some that people always talk about, and these are the go-to leadership styles. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna take a brisk walk down leadership lane. Right? When we go down these leadership lane, I'm going to break down some of the leadership principles that people follow. I'm going to ask you towards the end of it as one of your assignments is to think about which one of these you embody, right? I'll write it down. I have a little sheet here for you. I am a professor, so you have to have homework. But now we're going to talk about that. So the first leadership principle I'm going to talk to you about that people often talk about is that of a charismatic leader. Right? Someone who influences others through their personality, right? Cesar Chavez, Arati, she's somebody who's big and overseas and about running these bigger, wide-scale organizations, right? They behave energetically. Some of their advantages are they spur people into action. They can get groups of people together. The disadvantages is that it's all leader-driven, right? So you're falling in love with somebody who is the leader for who they are, but sometimes people are so blind in their followers and they're idealizing and romanticizing their follower that it's really about that. And sometimes that puts people at risk, right? I'm characterizing myself as, hey, I like this leader. Sometimes it's not even about their principles, right? The next one here is that we talk about is servant leadership. You may have heard that for someone who's really focused on service, right? I like this quote by the Prime Minister of the Cultural Affairs of France, right? To command is to serve, nothing more and nothing less, right? That is the true part of a servant leader, right? Their focus is on how I can help others, right? They have advantages. They can build strong, close-knit, focused teams, right? But they can also have some disadvantages to all of them. Sometimes they're not somebody, sorry, that's supposed to say existing, there's not somebody who can come in and just change it. There has to be an existing system there, right? They do not find structure or roles. So although each of these can be seen as pretty powerful, there are some opportunities that we need to look at them for. So transactional leader, someone who's really about just being transactional. Leadership is unlocking people's potential to become better. Vince Lombardi, he was in charge of the Green Bay Packers. Emily, I believe you are out in that area, so Emily knows that one well, and Bill Gates. Vince Lombardi, believe it or not, the one claim to fame my high school is that he was also born in Queens, and he went to my high school, which actually gives me nothing, right? So the qualities of a transactional leader is someone who focuses on mid-level managerial managers. They're the ones that are gonna build that team, right? They could achieve short-term goals pretty quickly, but often at times, some of their strategies, it limits creativity, right? Transactional, I give you this, you do this. So it's not saying, what do you think about it? How do you think about it? It's really about just that transaction. Thoreau says a man or a woman should be known by their questions and not by their answers, right? I believe a leadership principle is about your questions. So if you have a transactional leader, they're only telling you do this, not nothing more. You're not getting sometimes what you need, particularly to develop people. I like being the answer person. All day long, people come in, ask me questions. I provide answers like, this is great. And then at the end of the day, I got nothing done. All I did was answer questions all day long. So what I started to do was ask questions. Oh, Lynn, what do you think we should do about this? What do you think, right? What other questions are you not asking? So I can try and ask as many questions as I have because I'm trying to help them focus. And as they're able to learn and grow in that way, then we all win. Next one is transformational leader. Admiral Michelle Howard, U.S. Navy's first female four-star admiral, and Nelson Mandela. Transforming places, right? How do we move things in a different direction? And many people would say that there's many of these that you can list, right? Qualities, they refuse traditional confines or rules, right? You want somebody there who's just not gonna accept the norm. The principle I follow is called, do not accept the furniture for the way it is, right? furniture moves, right? So why do you have to accept it for where it is and the way it is? Advantages, they accept new ideas. Some of the disadvantages are that automatically it's going to conflict sometimes with bureaucracy, right? Right, and also it's going to requires an existing system to change or fix again, right? So this is my quick synopsis of that. What I have that you'll be able to do some handouts is some other people here, autocratic leadership. Helen Gurley Brown, she was the founder of Cosmopolitan. Think of the devil wears Prada, right? Autocratic leadership that does that. Laissez-faire, somebody who, if they're delegate, they're about putting a good team together, right? I think Roosevelt says here, the best executive is one who has the sense enough to pick good men to do what he wants and self-restraint enough to keep from meddling with them while they do it. But of course, with that, some people think that that person is lacking in accountability. And then you have the bureaucratic leadership and then democratic leadership also. So these are just some other principles that I think is important. My question I have for you all, that is your homework to be done in the next 72 hours, is 3 questions here. What leadership style do you most identify with, right? There's components of them. What leadership style do you most identify? What leadership style have you seen in action? And then last, what leadership style best describes your approach, right? So there's one you identify with. Somebody's like, oh, I feel like I'm a servant leader. Well, which one often at times describes with your approach? Sometimes your leadership approach is different from what you might even see your leadership style is. So that's intentionally a question to kind of make you think about the differences. And again, some of these are tools that you can put in your toolbox. Some of them you're going to say, I need to do more research on this, right? I have to tell you, one of the most powerful things for me has been coming back to school and getting my PhD, because 20 years of a consultant, I had a lot of experience of working in different environments across the country, but I didn't know there were some other components to theories that I thought were here that really took my leadership to another level, but really took my consulting to another level. Things that I've done worked extremely well, but if I had knew these 2 or 3 other points, right, it helped elevate me to a key place for me in my own leadership. I like this quote, Kuzin Posner, leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. This is another time I want you to go to the chat here, and I want you to say, tell me what word is the most important in this sentence to you. What word is the most important and why? Leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. Shared, right? Because it's about more than myself, right? Another shared, the struggle, right? Think about it this way. You have never heard a leader sit back, they say, tell me about your best leadership experience. And the leader says, well, I was home and I was sitting on my couch and my feet were up and I was called to lead. It doesn't happen, right? There's usually a struggle. I was faced with this and we did that, right? Oh, I love the word art, right? Leadership is an art. It's beautiful, right? Mobilizing, right? Unlearning, I love it, right? Unlearning. And then also, it's the other one is aspirations, right? Aspiring for more, right? Going to different places. So I really love it. And mobilizing is about engagement. Like, how do we engage? How do we move people forward? A lot of these principles fall in what we'll be talking about for the rest of the day. And that is what an adaptive leader does. In this environment, what does an adaptive leader do, right? So adaptive leaders anticipate and employ a broad-based style of command. Adaptive leaders take risk and make decisions, learn from events, and adjust plans accordingly. How many people saw the chameleon there already? Anybody? Nobody. All right, good. So then I want you to, again, to tell me what is the most important word in this sentence. Here, what are some important words? Adaptive leaders, what do they do that's important? Go ahead and write some of the anticipate, right? You got to see what's coming, right? There's a lot of people who rely on you to see what's coming, and they take risk, right? How are we going to list? That word learn is in there. A true leadership principle is somebody who is a continual learner, right? Adjust, right? Not sticking to it. And some people are like, oh, well, this is the way we did it. We have to stick to it. You have to adjust also. And you know what? This is not all about you if you're not engaging, right? If you're not looking and you're engaging. And that whole decision word, decisions, that's a whole nother ballgame, right? How do you make these decisions, right? How do you anticipate them? The last one is, how do you learn from events? For many of you, I see some of you have been in my trainings before. For many of you, you have seen this thing called what I talk about reflection being a leadership principle. So I just finished a class that we're doing for board certification, a partnership with United Way, and we have 6 sessions in a row. We're at session 2. At the beginning of each session, I say, this is our time for reflection. What have you learned? What have you unlearned? What can or did you apply? What have you learned? What have you unlearned? What can or did you apply? If people are like, well, I'm in class, I'm taking this not to unlearn, but you have to realize often at times, somebody's glass is so full. Think about a glass of water. If it's so full, you can't put any more water in it, right? So sometimes you have to pour a little bit out. So you have to unlearn stuff so you can fit more in, right? As growing as a leader, I love what Kristen said here. Reflection is so important in growing as a leader, right? So this is learning from your events, learning from your interactions, right? Being able to be in that adaptive space there. So what we're going to spend a lot of our time to do is talking about what is the leadership approach, and then I'm going to give you some tools that leaders use that can be extremely helpful for you, and I'll give you some scenarios for them as well. Okay, the adaptive leadership approach. I'm going to walk you through each of these here. Leadership challenges are complex. You have to realize that an adaptive leader talks about how complex they are. There is no one right answer, right? There's the technical, when you talk to anybody about adaptive leadership, and I'll share this in a little bit, there's a technical issue, right? And then there's often an adaptive challenge, a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge. When you look at something and it's a quick answer, that's a technical challenge. So leadership, when it's talking about being complex, there's no right answer. Real risk must be balanced against reward, right? The leader does not impose a solution. The final solution emerges from the dialogue of all parties. So an adaptive leader is really pulling this information together. All parties learn from one another. So it's not this top-heavy organization where everything is at the top. And most of the time, information is held at the top. And everyone must adapt their perspective in order for a solution to emerge, right? Having that environment. So the question would be for you is, how do you all create an environment that allows change to occur? How do you create an environment that allows for a free flowing of information? And you can write that in the chat if you think you have an answer for it that might help someone else. But how do you create the environment for some of these solutions to emerge? You ever heard of somebody who says, I was at the meeting and the meeting was great, but the meeting after the meeting in the parking lot was so much better, right? That means in their space, they didn't feel like it was an open environment, right, that allowed a culture of inquiry so we can all grow from it, but they actually are feeling like they may or may not be able to say something here. I want people to not be talking in the parking lot, but also be talking inside. And I love that, Caroline, talking about allowing the flexibility, right? Allowing people to be who they are, knowing that your way is not the only way, and there are other ways that could help and support you. And one way you can do that is to be able to asking questions, right? Very good. Another way you can do that is to diagnosing the challenge. Now, I'm gonna keep going, but if you have questions, Dana's gonna help me with that. If you have any questions, please feel free to put the questions in there. But I got a lot of good information, so I wanna make sure you get it.
Hey, Lynn, let me just pause real quick. There was one, the comments were coming quickly, but there was one asked to repeat. You made the comment about learn, unlearn, and then how do you apply, I think was what you said. The question was, what was the third thing? It was learn, unlearn, and
I want somebody else to say, so it proves that they are knowing it. Does anybody know what the third component was? What do you learn? What do you unlearn? What can you do, or did you apply?
Yeah, what can you apply? There you go.
What can you, or did you apply? Thank you very much. That was a really, really good question. And Dana, thanks for pausing me, because I was about to kick it into 5th gear. Now I can slow down a little bit because I had a little pause there. So the systems, the structure, you have to identify what the challenge is. I mentioned about these 2 technical and also known as is it an adaptive challenge? Technical being pretty simple. We didn't get paid. Let's talk about how come somebody didn't rate payroll, right? And adaptive, very, very significant. Is this the best place? What have we been doing in relation to payroll? Things of that magnitude, of that nature, right? So is it a systemic problem? Is it a system problem, right? Is it the structure, the processes? is the challenge, is it a challenge that has really more of a cycle of failure, dependency on authority? And then the last one is the values, the loyalties, and where are the alliances, right? Ooh, you loose. Oh, sorry about that. I'm talking so quickly and writing so quickly, sometimes there's a little bit of error that I'll make sure I correct for you. So leadership on the line and the pain of change. So I'm gonna walk through the technical and adaptive breakdowns here. And then I'm also gonna help explore the problem definition and the solver so you can kind of look at this. So often at times the technical is known and clear and the solver can be solved by somebody who's an expert, right? A combination, the problem is partially known and often at times it could take the expert and the group, but in adaptive, it's often unclear and it also takes all or the entire group. So those are some things that you can kind of look at where you can kind of see that. So the adaptive leadership role. So I am going to spend most of our rest of our time talking about what adaptive leadership strategies there are. I value and think of each of these being a tool, right? So maintaining a secret heart, getting into the balcony, think politically. So we're going to go through each of these. I'm going to give you some tools for them and for some ways to think about them. And we're going to start with this. All right, everybody join me. We're doing a visioning exercise. So we're on the 101 and it's just a beautiful day. We're by ourselves and this is just wonderful. I can't believe that I don't have any stress. I don't have anything to worry about. What kind of car are you driving? What kind of car? Write it in the text. What kind of car is anybody driving? If you're by yourself, you're on the 101. A VW Bug, a Mazda, Lexus, Prius, Honda, and then also, is it convertible? Bicycle, Tesla, very nice. Got to be a convertible, right? What color is it? Somebody give me some really good colors. Red, of course, silver, red, blue, navy, rust orange. I'm sorry, can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do rust. I can't do yellow, but I can do red. Okay, red convertible, lava orange. Now it's just getting out of control, right? So now we're gonna, so this is what you're doing. You're driving. Now somebody tell me what music is playing. Mint green 57 Chevy. Terry, invite me along. So tell me what jazz music? Very nice. Beach Boys? Very nice. Johnny Cash? All right. Old school R&B. Whew. Growing up in New York, I used to walk down the street and LL Cool J and Jam Master Jay, they'd stand on the corner and they were rapping before they came big. I should have hung out with them. LL, of course. So what I'm telling you now, so you have a red car, you're listening to your favorite music, and you have your top down. So now you see this. Mississippi, you see this. So tell me, what is it that you do? What do you do when you see this? Right? So some people would say, we slow down, right? Others would say, we're gonna turn on our lights. Some people say, hey, I gotta put that top up. So hopefully you pull over and you put the top up. Your fog lights on. Some people say, put your cell phone down. Some people grab the steering wheel a little bit tighter to pay attention. So what I'm trying to tell you here is, as far as leadership goes, I believe that one of our main responsibilities to help people clear their minds and to see things, our responsibility often at times is to lift the fog. If we can lift the fog for others, people can see clearly, right? So if that is a leadership principle that we have to adhere to, then we have to figure out what do we need to do that. Now people say, well, I can't see around the corner. Well, people, they actually they depend upon you to see around that corner, right? They depend on you and your leadership so you know what's coming around that corner. So what are some things that you can do to kind of help them see it? My question is going to be, is it fog or smoke? It's fog. Good question. So then now if you think about it this way. Sometimes you walk to work, sometimes you walk in your community, sometimes you walk in your home and it feels like fog. It may not see it, but it feels like fog. So the question is, do you slow down? Do you shine a light on it? Do you bring down the noise, right? Or do you power through and it says, well, somebody else will take care of it. I'm here to tell you that nobody else will take care of it. Often at times you are the person and it needs to be taken care of. I believe somebody tapped you on your shoulder and said, hey, beware, this is going to be a bigger problem later on. So you can do that. So how do you do it? Well, one principle is the first principle that we'll talk about today, and that is called getting into the balcony. right? Leadership on the Line, Ron Heifetz, great book that I've read. I think it's in my references as well. And it talks about getting in the balcony, right? So it's the dance floor and the balcony, right? Now, when you're on the dance floor, I mean, it's just great, right? You're cutting a rug, you're doing all these old style dances, right? It's a wedding, you're doing the funky chicken or whatever that is, right? So you're having a good old time, but you only can see what's around you. So somebody raised their hand. Okay, so you can only see what's around you, right? So this way that when you notice that, you'll see that there's something around you. But the problem is you can't see anything else. So sometimes as a leader, you have to get into that balcony to be able to look down so you can see what's going on. When you're in that balcony, right, you can see a number of things. One, you can see where people are congregating. You can see the exits. You can see the information going on. So often at times, one of the leadership principles, particularly for an adaptive leader, is to get off the dance floor and get into the balcony. I don't say stay in the balcony. When you stay in the balcony, there's sometimes a disconnect. Get on the dance floor and then stay that way. That's number one. Also, it helps you gain a holistic perspective, right? You get to observe patterns in different people, right? And then there's a time for personal reflection. When you're able to look up, it's personal reflection. I like this quote here because they're talking about what is the song beneath the words, right? What is the song beneath the words? How deep can we go? Dana, was there a question that popped up, or did you want to, that person want to ask?
No questions right now. Not yet.
Okay, I was curious if they, if we unmute people. Sorry about that. So that's number one, getting on the balcony. So what I want you to do is that if I've said something that makes you think, if I said something that's going to be extremely helpful to you, and you want that to be a tool in your tool belt, I want you to write it in the chat, because if it's important to you, it's probably important to someone else. So now, think about it this way. If you only had a hammer in your tool belt, what would that look like, right? What does a hammer see? A hammer only sees nails, right? So what you want to be able to do is to see, how can I put more things into my tool belt so I have more, right? Observing patterns in people. Very, very nice. Really, really appreciate that, right? So we're going to go to the next one. As you all are putting anything that you want people to highlight or anything, please put them in there. The next one is think politically, right? Thinking politically, right? Dance the relationship dance, right? Stay close to your opponents. They often say, keep your enemies closer, right? Often at times when you're thinking politically, you're courting the undecided. You're bringing people on your team. People say, oh, I don't like political. I don't like being political. You know, technically, I don't like it, but I might need to do it for my cause, right? I want to do it for my cause, allowing time for transition, but leave those behind that cannot make the change, right? That's a hard one right there. Leave those behind that can't make the change, right? So think about this, these goldfish that form this bigger shark, right? It's like if one of them, or even if a few of them, but it's like with this, right? Often at times the undecided, right? Or often at times bringing people along with you, then you can be an even more powerful force. Good. The next one here that I have is called orchestrating the process. Look at this guy. So it's like he enjoys his job, right? He enjoys what he's doing, right? This is like you saying, how do I make sure that this is the best way we can go? I'll spend a little bit more time on this when we talk about the organization, but sometimes you have to not provide the answers right away or not solve things right away. Sometimes you have to let the issues ripen, right? And then it's time for it to be solved. So often at times people are like, hey, I got to get in front of that right away. Sometimes you do, but an adaptive leader is able to identify at what point is the best for it. If you jump in and solve problems for everyone all the time, you sometimes have to wait and see who's going to step up, see who's going to challenge. Often at times giving the work back to the people. If I'm going to orchestrate this process, how do I give it back? Right? Oh, I love it. Baking the change, right? Allowing it to simmer a little bit, right? Make interventions often at times short and simple, and don't take personal attacks personally. So if I was going to go to a meeting, or if you were going to go to a meeting and you knew that somebody was going to ask a lot of questions, what do? If you were going to go to a meeting, you know somebody was going to ask you a lot of things, what do? You actually prepare more. So that person really, believe it or not, is challenging you to be better. Even though I can't stand them, even though I know they're asking so many questions, but they're really technically, by asking me those questions, they're pushing me to the next level. So often at times, orchestrating the process means sometimes I gotta allow that conflict to come in for us to be in a space where it allows us to kind of maneuver, a space where sometimes the true magic happens by pushing each other in a certain way. Oops. Okay, so anyone know what this is? This is Olympic cycling, right? So Olympic cycling, and for those of you who know, what it does is you're in this velodrome, and what happens is you're going around and around and around, you're trying to get the best speed. Well, there's a first person, second person, this is a 4-person team. My question to you all is, who is the leader in this situation? Who is the leader in this situation, right? Often at times, people will say, of course, the first person is the leader. Their responsibility is to break the wind. Their responsibility is to keep on track. Their responsibility is to know where we are, but also their responsibility is to know when it's time, right? They're all leaders. So what happens is the person in the front, what they do is they ultimately go up high and then they go to the back. So when they go up high and they go to the back, technically that second person had to be ready to take over. So they had a responsibility. They have to be ready to take over. And if you do not stay in line with everybody, you actually end up hitting the wind, hits you a little bit, and it's drag and it slows your team around. So even that second person has to know, hey, this is what my role is. My role is to stick to this tire. My role is to help them move forward. My role, so that second person has a leadership role in its own right. Now think about it this way though, when that first person goes to the back now, do they have a responsibility still? And answer is yes. They still have to stick to that line. They were just plowing away, but they still have to stick to that back tire. They have to recuperate, right? They have to get ready just in case they have to come back to it, right? And they also have to stay on pace. So each of these positions, believe it or not, there are leaders. So when somebody says they're all leaders, then that is correct, right? So the thing about it is that different times we all are going to be leaders, and different times we're all going to be followers. And we have to figure out at what point in time are we the leader and the follower, right? So let me tell you this. I am the world's worst follower, the worst that you'll ever meet. The reason I'm the worst follower is because let's say I'm in a meeting and I'm talking about something and I'm saying, hey, this is A, B, C, D, this is where we're going to go, this is what's going to happen. So when somebody else starts to talk, I'm writing stuff, I'm sometimes checking my messages, I'm trying to do all of this other stuff while that person is talking. I handed over the leadership responsible to that person. What I wanted and what I expected of people to say, hey, they're listening to me, active listening. They're looking for connections in their department, in their community, right? And they're seeing if there's any red flags. Meanwhile, when they're talking, I'm not doing the same. So we're gonna share responsibility, and I'm gonna be the leader and follower. When I'm supposed to be the follower role has responsibilities also. Right? So I'm going to be the leader and I'm going to be the follower. I'm going to be listening, active listening. I'm going to be seeing if there's connections between people, right? Figuring out there's ways, right? Like, so follower and a leader, like a flock of birds, right? Like making sure that we're understanding how we're moving things forward. So think about this vision in your mind here, a leader and a follower. There's a philosophy around leadership called followership. How do people concerned about the followers? How do we move things along in a follower perspective? Right? Very, very nice. Next one here is this door, this beautiful red door. People often ask me, Lynn, what's the difference between a leadership and a leader and a manager? I tell people a leader's at the door looking out, looking ahead, whereas the manager's inside looking at systems. One is looking outside, the other one is looking inside. What I didn't say was the leaders in the community, the leaders off fundraising, the leaders this. You still, as a leader, have to keep track of what's going on, but you're at the door so you can look out ahead, see what's to come, and while the management systems are doing that. So different ways to kind of like look at that. And I think that there's something to be said about timing, right? Taking your time sometimes. We talked about allowing it to happen, right? So this is the next one here, which I love, good old Abe. Abe says, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Now, Some of us say, give me that axe. And we're plugging away, bow, bow, bow. And the tree is going nowhere. And we're all tired and need to time out. But give me 6 hours to chop down a tree. And I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. I mean, that talks about the time and the planning. So sometimes that introduces our next one here, which is sometimes you have to hold steady, right? Sometimes you just have to process it. Sometimes you have to spend the time planning on it, right? Sometimes you have to focus the attention on the issues, right? Also, sometimes it's a time for risk, experimentation, right? So the next one is hold steady. Sometimes understanding what that truly means to hold steady. Next one, I'm gonna go off of that one, and the next one here is manage your hungers. Respect the ready availability of need and power and control, right? Intimacy and delight needs must be met appropriately. So how do we manage our hungers, manage what we want, right? How do we make sure that we're controlling that? Sometimes there's a more for, I am gonna do this because of my emotions. I'm gonna do this because nobody's gonna talk to me that way. I'm gonna do that because this community person did this or that or staff. We have so much that we have to think about now. Now somebody's gonna say this, and I'm gonna throw it out to you first before I answer it, is that what does these 3 things that I mentioned so far have to do with where we are right now? What does it have to do with the pandemic? What does this have to do with our fundraising? What does it have to do with everything that we have now? And I want you to fill that, start writing some of those things down, and I'll come back to it. So managing your hungers, right? The next one here, I love, Tim Tebow says this, the way you spend your time shows what you care about, right? If you care about your people, if you don't, can you repeat that? Yes. So the answer to the question I have is that, what so far we've covered a few principles, right? Of managing your hungers, holding steady. I want to know, has this triggered anything in your thinking about what this has to do with where you are right now? What does this have to do with where you are with the pandemic right now, where your organization is, where you are as a leader right now, right? This is it's a thoughtful question, but it's an open-ended question. If you feel comfortable, please put that down here. The way you spend your time shows what you care about, right? If I care about my team, I don't send them a written warning via email, right? I don't send them stuff via email. If I care about them, if I care about my community, I don't say, hey, we're closed, come back tomorrow, right? I know you have this. Sometimes it's a little bit more. I have to tell you, I've been telling people this. Everybody's about diversity, equity, inclusion now. I say you can measure the effectiveness of diversity, equity, and inclusion by asking them how much money and how much time they put towards it. When you find out how much money they put towards it, which is often at times 0, then that's when you're talking about what they care about, right? And then the next question is, why do they care about it, right? And I love this thing is hold steady right now. Do you know, I know this great dance theater, they shut down for the year. Even if we had opened up in month 2, they would have been closed because they said, we're just gonna use, they could do this. We're gonna use this as a strategic planning year. We're gonna hire somebody, a consultant, we're going through transition anyway, and we're gonna use this as a strategic planning year. I also talked to some people in months 1 and 2 that said, I don't wanna talk about it, it'll just work itself out, right? Some of these things don't do that. Some of them do, but who would have known we would have been where we are right now, right? In a different place. So the principles that we had, the tools that you had, next month, you might need to use all of these. You might need to use all of them in one day, right? So figuring out, how do I use these? How do I add these to it? And I'm just kind of like going through them so that you know. Anchor yourself. You have to anchor yourself in some reality, right? Don't confuse oneself with a professional role. Oh, I'm in charge here. Well, often at times people don't see you as you, they see you as the manager. They see you as the ED. So don't confuse them, make sure who you are, right? You, sometimes people are like, oh, I wanna talk to my peer about this issue that I'm having. Well, they might be an ally and you might be opening yourself up to something. So you wanna be mindful of that, right? And put yourself on the line in leading again and again, figuring out how do I put myself on the line a little bit. So how do I anchor myself, right? Before we move forward, how do I anchor myself, right? So interestingly enough, I think about it from a core value perspective. And before we jump into core values, I want you all to tell me, put in the chat, who do you think this is? Put it in the chat, who is it? Boom, boom, boom. I need 1 or 2 more people. Matthew M. Somebody wanted to get it in there quickly. Fisherman. This is Matthew McConaughey. And I don't think he would be appreciative if anybody just called him Matthew, right? He's one of those people you got to say Matthew McConaughey, right? He says here, it shows who you are, your core values and who you are, shows who you are, and it shows who you are not. And for $79,000, you too can ice fish out the back of your car, right? So your core values shows who you are and it shows who you are not, right? I'm sorry, Melinda says I didn't recognize him with his shirt on. That's just hilarious, right? So, okay, so core values, right? Literally, I could have spent 3 hours just talking about core values. That's how important that I believe they are. I believe that core values are something that are decision-making tools. I believe relationships flourish when core values are in alignment. I believe things fall apart when they're not. I don't partner with another agency if our core values aren't in alignment, right? Because we want to make sure that we understand what we all adhere to. If organizations don't have core values, there's plenty of material on the internet. You reach out to me and I'll give you some material in regards to that. But you want to identify what your core values are. You want to be able to have them around your organization. People say, well, I don't know. We don't have any. I don't know anything about it. I bet you if I stood outside your door and asked your clientele, asked your staff, what are the core values? They would name off stuff, right? So if they're going to name it off anyway, why not have a set of core values that you can govern yourselves by, right? That means your board, at your board table, they understand the core values and it's a decision-making tool. They understand the mission and vision. So I like mission, vision, core values, and strategy, right? People often stop at mission and vision. I throw core values in there and I definitely gonna throw strategy in there. This is the last of the principles that I'm gonna throw in here for you. And this one is encourage the heart, right? This is what they say is the magic behind it. A love for the field, a love for the environment, a love for what we're doing here, right? You recognize contributions by showing appreciation for individual excellence. I am not somebody who wants to be recognized in front of somebody. And it bothers me more than anything. You ever heard somebody say, oh, John did a great job. John, come on down. I know he doesn't like it, but come on down, right? John doesn't like to be recognized that way. And in fact, he doesn't feel like you're recognizing him at all right now, right? But he likes to be recognized a certain way. Somebody wrote me a handwritten letter the other day, and I actually paused, and it actually took my whole morning because I just felt like, wow, they took that much time to take out of the day to send me a handwritten letter. I thought it was appropriate, but that's the way I like to be recognized. My son, he's 6 years old. His name is Lynn, and I love him 90% of the time. He went to his school, and they gave out the Teacher of the Month award. Well, the Teacher of the Month didn't have a car. So they gave her a parking spot. Hey, the Teacher of the Month has a parking spot, but she has no car. So how do I make sure that I'm making sure that people are being recognized the way they like to be recognized and the way they are? So people say, well, how do I do that? I say, ask, right? Sometimes in the initial interviews, I'm like, so when you get to recognize, how do you like to be recognized? Sometimes I share around our team at our table, but making sure that I'm celebrating success, right? And people know that we care about them enough to know how to recognize them and what to recognize them about. And I know we have a few minutes here before we go to some Q&A, there's two other things I wanna show you. One is that this goes back to that sacred heart. So with the quality of heart, you have to be careful because with this innocence often comes cynicism, right? And it's dressed up as being real. Somebody's like, no, I'm not being cynical, I'm just being real. Well, it's being dressed up as being real, right? So you want to figure out, how do I maintain this innocence? Also, the curiosity. Sometimes the curiosity is okay, asking the key questions, but sometimes it comes off as an arrogance and it comes out authoritative. When I was working in New York City, they were like, I said, hey, I made a mistake. They were like, no, you didn't, because you do things calculated. And I was just like, it was a mistake. But what happened was, I believe at the time, my arrogance let people think that, of course, I'm doing this, right? So I want to be mindful of that. Thankfully, I moved to California and I left all my arrogance behind. So the next one here, the quality of heart, compassion, right? Sometimes compassion becomes callousness, and then I'll say they need to develop a thick skin. So I'm compassionate, but sometimes because of the work, because of what happens, I become callous, and then a thick skin says, oh, they need more thick skin. I had to develop it. I learned this way, so they should learn that way, okay? And then this one here is called the adaptive leadership methods. Often at times people say, let's use a case in point. Let's use this case as our main area and let's stay on this, right? We're talking about your work environment or your classroom is a studio. Success and failure stories, share and analyze. And then also, how do you do that? We can do that through some good coaching and coaching opportunities, some personal assessments. I believe 360 is an extremely important way to look at it. Also, the fog and other metaphors, right? How do we use some of the fog and some of these metaphors as we move things along? So these are some really, really key areas that I think that we can work with. I will stop there. I could go another hour, but I'll stop there so we can take some questions, and we look forward to answering some more of the questions you have even after this session.
All right, very good. Well, thank you. So I've got a couple questions here, and I'll just put a plug for anybody else. You can type a question in the chat and I'll read it for Lynn. So our first question is, how can you tell when you are mistaking an adaptive challenge for a technical challenge?
Yep, very nice. So an adaptive, that's extremely good. So adaptive challenge often at times is a technical challenge is really going to be quick. Something that there's a clear answer for, right? It's crystal clear. Sometimes you're right. If it's something that you find is clear, but you find yourself even pausing on it, more than likely it may not be an adaptive a challenge, right? So you want to make sure that you're looking at it in a way that you can figure out what that is. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for this sheet right here so that you can get it like here. Right, so it's really more something that's quick and it's known and it's easy, and sometimes that it could be something that you jump on also. So this one here is, developing and passing it on, teaching a culture of adaptive leadership. So this is just a little bit more, but it's really more about if it's really quick and it's simple, then it's a technical challenge. A technical challenge can grow into an adaptive challenge, but often at times you want to be able to know if it's easy, if it's quick, and it's well known. If you have to uncover anything, it's going to take a little bit more time, and you should follow adaptive philosophies when it comes to that.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Our next question is from Caroline, and she's asking, how do you deal with a leader that empowers you to lead, at the same time intervenes from time to time?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So it's like they give me the leadership role, but then they don't sometimes allow me to lead. And I believe that the best way that you can do that is giving that person feedback. And I'll show you before we end, I'll show you steps that I have for giving feedback that I think are extremely important. I'll do it briefly now, and I'll spend a lot more time on it in the second part of this. But it's really about giving this person feedback. And I believe that your growth and your development should be extremely important to you. So I talk to somebody, I say, hey, how did that conversation go? Oh, we didn't get around to it because we were talking about everything else. Oh, so I guess it wasn't that important to you, right? If it's important to you, you'll have those conversations. How you give the feedback, often at times people respect you for stepping up and giving that feedback, right? And the other thing is that sometimes I might even just say directly that, that was extremely helpful. Or sometimes I'll say that's not helpful. But I think that the feedback is going to be important, but often at times you have to be in a place where you have that space for feedback. So it's not, I can't give somebody feedback in the hallway. There has to be a moment in time. I think that you should be meeting with your supervisees once to twice a month at a minimum, so that you set the environment for feedback. The last thing you should do is, as a leader, you should ask, if you see somebody cringe after you say something, and I say, hey, you know what? It doesn't sound like I said that the best way. What way could I have said that would have made it easier? I'm learning as a leader, right? But that in that same way, I can hopefully expect to be able to give communication back to the person who's above me as well. But there's a lot of books on it. It's called Managing Up. And I often at times find myself in that role to manage up.
Yeah. I've got two more questions. We'll see if we can get through both of them. One, at the beginning of the discussion, you were talking about the different types of leadership styles, right? You started with charismatic, then you went through servant, transactional, transformational. So I would guess many on the call and in the audience are probably more of the servant leader, right? Thinking about the not-for-profits. And this may be a time that we need to be transformational leaders. So any guidance, as we're leading through a pandemic, how we change. And some of your opening comments, you talked about that, right? We're not going back to where we were. We got to change, and we got to change fast, right? So any guidance on how one sort of floats from one to the next to be more effective during this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely hard, right? I keep talking about you have to have the tools in order to know, but I do think that you're right in that sometimes, well, I can't say that anybody from any one sector is going to be any specific style. Often at times we have gone into this way, and there's often at times no perfect individual, but there are perfect teams. We all have different skill sets, right? So from a leadership perspective, you're right. I can go into different areas. I have to know what they are. I do think it takes some kind of like searching. It takes some continued development in focus areas. But the reality is that there are several more of these. These are just the beginning. And I think if you say, hey, I think I'm more of the transformational leader, then you might want to do a little bit more work in that area. There's also situational leadership. Somebody who in that situation, they step up and call it, and then that situation is what drives it. So there's a lot of these. Can you learn from a lot of these? You definitely can. Can you learn from a lot of the books from it? You definitely can. But that we're learning in the doing, but often at times with the doing, we're not learning because we're doing so much.
Right.
Right. So reflection and then looking at that are ways that we can do that.
Got it. And then the last question, unless there's any else in the chat, but when you were talking about the adaptive strategies, you were talking about, getting on the balcony and then thinking politically and then orchestrating the process. And there was a bullet point in there about allowing the grief or the sadness of whatever the challenge is, but then also leaving behind those that can't change. So just, can you expand a little bit on that and how you, given this environment is so unusual and there are so many stressors that are being added to people's professional and personal lives, how do you really make that decision on when to leave somebody behind?
Yeah, often at times, first of all, I believe in the power of meetings and developing people. So if people are falling short in any way, shape, or form, if I'm telling them and they're aware of it, then that's one way to make sure that they're at least in line with it. Sometimes people, they fall off a little. Sometimes you can tell that they're not on board. Some of those one-on-one conversations are going to be helpful. Sometimes they just process things differently. So if I'm going to meet with someone tomorrow and it's going to be a big old meeting, I might give it to that person the day before because they just need more time to process it, right? So is it me or is it them? Every staff member that I meet with, if I have to tell them things, I cater it specifically to each person individually. Right? It's because I know how they like to hear it. So there's different ways. Now, this race, the reason I put these people back up, because it's actually one set is guys and one set is girls, and sometimes I can't tell the difference between them, the way that they're all have this stuff on. But if that last person fell off, do you think they would all just stop? Like, right? No, right? There's a point where they're gonna still say, hey, we prepared for this, we did this. I know that this person's behind. There's that whole, do we leave the person behind kind of thing? Well, the reality is that they have a goal that they have all established, right? And sometimes that goal right there is about getting a time done. So sometimes you may have to kind of leave people down. I just say that you prepare them. And it seems in this issue that they were a team, they probably practiced and they probably were all prepared for it.
Right. Right. And we have a comment here from Carol. Sometimes you need to give them permission to leave, right? They may be wanting and just need to
leave.
Okay.
I have to tell you, every organization I take over, I call it the rule of threes. A third of the people, they get on board with it. A third of the people say, I'm not on board with it, and they leave. And then a third of the people got to get fired.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is me in 5 different states. This is what I've always, it's always happened roughly around there. But the point here is not that it's exactly a third or anything. The point is that there are going to be people who get on board. There are going to be others that don't. And there are going to be others that that need to go. So we just have 2 minutes, and I mentioned that I would share something else with them. Do you mind if I do that really quick, Dana?
Yeah.
How much time do I have? Like 2 minutes?
We got a minute and a half.
Oh, that's plenty of time. Okay, so I have something here in the front of you that I'm calling giving constructive feedback, giving and receiving constructive feedback. It's just some steps that I have used throughout my career. I have used these for 20 years now, and literally if I have to fire somebody, I pull this out again, and if I have to give somebody feedback, I pull it out. I'm going to give you an example of somebody who's late for work. Hey, when we said that we were all going to be here on time, Specifically, what I observed was when you were late and everybody was waiting outside for you. Do you understand what I mean? The person says yes. And then you focus the discussion on solutions. You're giving people feedback in a way that it helps them understand it. And it's not what I saw 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So this is giving, this is receiving. They help with some steps. We can talk about it more. But the bigger thing here is that people don't give feedback. That's the issue. They were like, well, I got to give them feedback. Well, you know, I don't want to mess up their morning. You know, it's lunchtime. It seems like they're very happy going to lunch. Why should I mess that up? And then, oh, they're going home. I don't want to mess up their weekend. And then the reality is it never gets to them, but you still want them to change, right? So if you want them to change, you want to give them feedback. I give this to you and I say, stick to the script, right? Allow yourself to do that. Pleasure being with you all today. I hope you were able to put some more tools in your tool belt. Love the Bank of America and everybody's team members here. Appreciate it. And the Nonprofit Institute.
Yes.
Love seeing you guys and love seeing the names again that I know. So thank you all very much.
Lynn, thank you for joining us today. Let me tell you, this hour flew by. I can't believe it's already over. But you held true to your word. You told us you were going to give us some usable tools, some adaptability tools. We'll make sure that everybody that participated today gets the content and also this slide. You see we've got some asks here for this giving and receiving feedback. So thank you again for your partnership. We look forward to part 2 and hope everybody on the call today is able to join us in a couple weeks. Until then, thank you.
Thank you.